How often, when trying to promote a skeptical approach towards some claimed paranormal phenomenon, have you heard someone say, "I know what I saw"? Well, in this video, I want to show you that you should never trust your eyes alone, because they lie to you. I assume that you have seen my video on colour perception in the 6 Impossible Things playlist. Of course you have. So I'll not be touching on colour here. I plan in the future to go into much more detail in my attempt to provide you with evidence and references to show how the human brain, far from being intelligently designed, is a hodgepodge of bolted together components which have evolved over time, not to be the perfect biochemical machine, but simply to meet the requirements of allowing us to survive long enough to pass on our genes to our offspring. Neuroscientists and neuropsychologists rarely touch on or apply their findings to religious beliefs, and I have never heard one neuroscientist mention creationism. They are more interested in developing their science rather than debunking outdated superstitious beliefs. So I shall try to review what they have learned about the human brain and show how that provides evidence for evolution and exposes the myth of creation. Creationists often throw out the junkyard whirlwind jumbo jet analogy. That is a very poor analogy for the human brain. If you had some skilled aircraft engineers and a junkyard pre-stocked with spare parts from Boeing, then they might build you a jumbo jet. But if you supplied them with a working replica of the Wright Flyer and told them they must create a jumbo jet by bolting pieces onto that, whilst keeping the original components in place and most of the original performance and functionality, then they would struggle mightily, and whatever they ended up with, it would not be a jumbo jet. Creators of modern aircraft start with a blank sheet for a reason. Modern aircraft are designed. The human brain is not. Back to this video, and I want to show you that you should never trust your eyes alone, because they lie to you. Well, of course, that itself is incorrect. Your eyes are sense organs, incredibly complex ones, but also incredibly limited ones. What you see is the result of how your brain interprets signals from your eyes, and importantly, it is often what your brain simply makes up and fools you into thinking that you have seen. As you sit, stand, or lie down now, and presuming that you have reasonable sight, you will be seeing all that is in front of you. Even as you look straight ahead, your peripheral vision will allow you to see things roughly 170 degrees in all directions. Or maybe not. Let's start simply, the blind spot. Hold your head roughly 3 times the distance between the L and R from the screen. Cover your left eye and focus on the letter L with your right eye. Slowly vary the distance between you and the screen, and the letter L will disappear. We don't normally notice our blind spot because of our binocular vision, the fact that our eyes continually make micro movements, and our brain, which likes to lie about what we see by filling in the gaps. You will notice that when the letter L disappeared, you were not left with a hole in your vision. Your brain patched it over based on the surrounding visual cues. And whilst apart from your blind spot you might think that you have nice clear vision, you have not. Imagine wearing a pair of glasses with a fine smearing of petroleum jelly covering the lenses, apart from a small clear central spot. That is what your vision is actually like. Take a moment to think about your peripheral vision as you watch this video, and you'll quickly see that I'm correct. Your brain fools you into thinking your vision is clear across your visual field, when it is in fact only clear across the 1 or 2 degrees of your focusing point. At the back of the eye is the fovea, a small pit with a high concentration of cones, allowing for high visual acuity in daylight, but only over a very restricted region of your visual field. Over the rest of that 170 degrees of great vision you think you have, you'd be lucky to get past the top line on an eye chart. It gets worse. Even when you're awake, you might as well have your eyes closed for 2 more hours each day. Unless you are concentrating on detailed work or reading, you are probably blinking around 10 times a minute. You don't notice your eyes closing and opening because it would be very annoying, so your brain lies to you, as it does whenever you move your eyes. This is a fun one to teach kids. Take 2 kids and a hand mirror. Ask the first to look into the mirror and focus on their left eye in the mirror. Ask the second to watch the first's eyes. Then get the first kid to switch their gaze back and forth between their eyes rapidly for 5 seconds or so. Now ask number 1 whether they saw their eyes move in the mirror. They will not have seen their eyes move, whilst kid number 2 and you would have. This is an illustration of saccadic masking. If you turn your head to the right now, keeping your eyes looking straight ahead at all times, you will notice that your gaze does not drift smoothly, but makes many small jerky movements. The same thing occurs when you are reading a line of text. This allows the eye, the 1 to 2 degrees of acute vision provided by the fovea, to resolve specific items of interest in the visual field. When we gaze on the world, or a human face, our eyes continually jump around to points of interest. If our vision was continuous, then the world would be a dizzy place, and so the brain switches vision off during these saccades. We are effectively blind for up to 2 hours a day, but our brain lies to us and fills in the gaps. This saccadic suppression leads to the stopped clock illusion, or chronostasis. Have you ever noticed that when you check the time on a clock, the first second appears to take extra long to pass? Is that just an illusion? No, it's your brain lying to you. The current thinking is that as you switch your gaze to the clock, saccadic suppression comes into play. Once you are fixated on the clock, your brain backfills the saccade with the image you are now receiving. So you do not experience the blur of moving your gaze to the clock, or blindness from your brain switching your sight off during the saccade, but instead your brain fills the short interval of the saccade with the image of the clock as you first perceive it. Thus time appears to stand still for a moment. This is all tame stuff, but what if you could not even see what was right in front of your eyes? Flash suppression can be experienced if a steady image is presented to one eye whilst a blank field is presented to the other. A flashing image is then presented to the second eye, and the steady image presented to the first eye disappears. Experiments with continuous flash suppression have resulted in a subject being effectively blind to an image presented to them for over 3 minutes. This might appear to be of interest only to those studying the intricacies of how our sight and perception work, but it is important to remember that we do not always see what is right in front of our eyes. Change blindness is perhaps the best example of this. Our senses are not designed to provide us with a perfect continuous image of the world around us. They evolved through the need for us to survive long enough to breathe. Is it poison or food? Friend or foe? Do I freeze, fight, flee, or fuck crying out loud I'm cold, hot, hungry, horny? These are what our senses need to determine to help us survive and procreate. Change blindness has been proven in experimentation and for comic effect. Search YouTube for change blindness and amuse yourself. Then consider how much weight you should put on eyewitness testimony when you yourself are likely not to notice when the person asking you for directions or the person serving you at an information desk is switched with a completely different person during a brief distraction. Inattentional blindness occurs when you, or your brain, completely fails to pick up on an unexpected or unusual stimulus in plain sight because it is busy concentrating on something else. Daniel Simons provides an excellent example of inattentional blindness, which I will not spoil for you if you've missed it. It is very amusing and deadly serious. If you text whilst driving after watching that, then your concern for other road users really should be a matter for internal examination. There are many other ways our eyes or brains deceive us, including out-of-body experiences, which can be induced by stimulation of the brain and will be covered in a future video. But I would finally like to briefly mention memory. You probably know that you have short-term memory and long-term memory. What you can remember about what you did yesterday is completely different to what you can remember about the same day last year. And you have a semantic memory for facts, which is separate from your emotional memory for events, which is separate from your procedural memory, which allows you to remember how to ride a bike or drive a car, or simply walk without thinking about it. Whilst this is an area of intense study, it is currently understood that memories are moved around in the brain and certainly not stored as zeros and ones to be recalled later in perfect unchanged detail. Short-term memory is quite detailed. At some point, specific categorized memories are stored in long-term memory, but much of the detail is lost. When memories are later recalled, they are manipulated by the brain and then restored. They change. This video is not about memory, but you should remember that everything you think you saw comes from the memories created by, stored, modified, moved, and then recalled by your imperfect and deceiving brain based only partly on input from your less than perfect eyes. In the next video in the series, I plan to implant a false memory into your brain and talk a little more about memory in general. Thank you, as always, for watching.